Welcome, guys. We're breaking down the Pac 12 matchup. Utah off a rare home loss. Arizona State comes in red hot against the spread. I want to say this. I was looking, my son does a Streakers college football and NFL each week that I put in the Bet On It guide. And Arizona State's one of those sneaky teams that, despite going 1-3 their last four games, they've actually covered four straight. You find much more value in those type of dogs than you do in Utah. But in this situation, I am not going to be backing the red hot Arizona State Sun Devils, but I'm not going to back Utah either. I'm looking at the under, and I'm looking at the under in the first half. Now, Arizona State has started the season off. They struggled early with quarterback injuries. They actually had their fourth string quarterback play a few snaps a couple games ago. They now have some consistency with the same quarterback starting the last three games. But what's really impressed me is their defense. Over the last 4 weeks, California, they held them to 326 yards. Colorado, 295. Washington, 288. And Washington State, 403 yards. It was a good passing team, and they allowed over 300 yards per game passing. They don't have to worry with this Utah offense. When I went and looked at some numbers, guys, I wanted to pull explosive plays, those plays that are 10 yards or more. Arizona State is number 99. They do not break big plays. They are methodical. They run the ball. They have short passes. Utah is even worse. Utah is number 123 out of 133 teams as far as plays of 10 plus yards go on the season. When I look at Utah, I mentioned they were off that home loss to Oregon, a big home loss, and they were just outplayed. They got held to 240 yards. They were outgained by 149 yards. Oregon was the better team on the field, no question. But I do want to mention this, even though I'm going to use the total, Utah is 17-7 against the spread on loss. When I look at the total when they're off a home loss, they are 6-10-1 over under when the totals are 54 or higher. Arizona State 2-6 over under in 2-6 over under this season. So both we know want to run the ball. Yes, the total is low at 41 or 41 and a half or 42, but I'm going to look at the first half. Both teams try to establish the line of scrimmage. Both teams will run the ball in the first half. If one team gets behind, that'll force them to throw the ball even more. We're getting 21 for a first half number. I like that. These teams may not score 3 touchdowns combined the complete game. So give me under 21, first half action, Arizona State Sun Devils and Utah Utes.
All right, guys, we got Saturday here. Notre Dame and Clemson, a big one with the Fighting Irish and the Tigers going out in Death Valley, South Carolina. We are seeing Notre Dame -3 as the road favorite. And look, guys, I like this Notre Dame team. I really do. Sam Hartman, I think we get the better college football quarterback here. I think we get the better offensive line and the better defense. I think a lot points towards Notre Dame. And when you look at Clemson, I'm pulling it up right now. I mean, 2-6 against the spread. Dabo Swinney, we've all kind of heard about, the fans, giving them some grief. Hey, this program isn't headed in the right direction, if you will. And to tell you the truth, college football, if you're not winning, your seat's going to start heating up here. They're paying a lot of money to these head coaches, and I don't think they're going to win this one, guys. They've dropped 3 straight against the spread, and that includes the NC State, Miami, and Wake Forest. They're taking a big step up in class here. Notre Dame's been tested this season, strong strength of schedule, really good players, well coached. I think actually they make the trip here from South Bend to Clemson, South Carolina, and they win. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of ugly fashion, blowout fashion, if you will. I think Notre Dame wins something like 35-17. I'd lay the 3 here with the Fighting Irish.
Hey, everybody, here today with the big game breakdown, college football style. Going to go to the SEC West to be exact, where Texas A&M is going to travel to Oxford, Mississippi, play the Ole Miss Rebels. Game opened Ole Miss 4-54. Currently, as we do the show here, Ole Miss down to -3 and 54. And I have to say, my initial reaction here was to play Mississippi in some capacity in this game. Ole Miss at home this season, 4-0 against the spread. A&M under Jimbo Fisher, 0-11 straight up on the road. If you're a technical handicapper, if you're an SDQL guy, that may be enough to get you to the window. Wasn't for me. I even considered playing Ole Miss first half here on the premise that, where head coaches are concerned, Lane Kiffin is more apt to be a little more creative right out of the chute than is Jimbo Fisher, certainly a conservative head coach. Even with Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator this year, they still seem conservative to me. And if you're going to get a trick play or two early, it would come out of Ole Miss and maybe they could cover first half. But when I dug deeper into this game, I found my way to the total here. Let's take a look at a couple of things. For Mississippi, there's been a little bit of a change in the offense here. No longer the high scoring. It's still high octane. They still go fast, but they're leaning on the run significantly more than they have in the past. Sort of a change of direction here for Lane Kiffin. The play calling percentages for Ole Miss right now, 58% on the season toward the run, 42 pass. That's almost 60-40 split there. The total yardage, 57% run, 43% pass. So they're calling more running plays, obviously almost 60-40, and just about the same percentage where the yardage is concerned. So run heavy offense here for Ole Miss against a Texas A&M run defense that's really been statistically elite thus far on the season. They only allow 96.1 rushing yards per game, 2.8 per carry. However, if you take those numbers, take their statistical numbers and weed out the sack yardage, weed out the sacks that they've had, and go for true rushing numbers, because of course sack yardage is included in college rushing statistics. If you weed all that sack stuff out, you're going to find that A&M has had 237 rushing attempts against them for 973 yards. That's 4.1 yards per carry. Sounds a little different than 2.8. So obviously what you can take from that is A&M is a real good quarterback pressure team. The only team to punish them on the ground so far this year in all their games was Tennessee. Tennessee got them for 216 rushing yards, 4.7 per carry. QB Joe Milton wasn't really a part of that running game for Tennessee there. He only carried the ball 8 times. That's a little bit of a contrast to Jackson Dart, the QB for Ole Miss, who carries the ball on average 10.5 times per game, gains almost 41 yards per. I think what sold me on playing this game under the total of 54 was how similar this game looks to the Tennessee game that Texas A&M played. Let's go through the similarities here. First off, Texas A&M was on the road in Knoxville. Very tough venue, obviously like the stadium here at Ole Miss. Head coach Josh Heupel for Tennessee, head coach Lane Kiffin, they're a lot alike offensively. If you just look at tempo numbers this year, plays per second, Tennessee averages the 6th fastest tempo in the country. Ole Miss number 12, right in line there. Each have the same spread the field philosophy. They really do, in essence, like to establish the run first. The perception is they want to wing it all over the lot, but these two guys really like to establish the run first. They'll attack you vertically and push downfield. Ton of similarities between the head coaches. QBs, Joe Milton, Jackson Dart. This is my personal opinion, but I don't find either of them to be trustworthy on a consistent basis where accuracy is concerned. Joe Milton misses a lot of balls he should complete, a lot of throws he should complete. Same for Jackson Dart. Makes a lot of mistakes. They may have periods inside of a game where they're lighting it up. They may have an individual game where they light it up. But overall, these guys are very similar where passing accuracy is concerned. I think that the Tennessee defensive improvement this year kind of mirrors what's going on at Ole Miss. These two teams right now, if you're looking at SEC defensive rankings, they're 2 of the top 4 sack teams in the conference. They're number 4 and 5 in the SEC in points allowed. Tennessee allowing 20.4, Ole Miss 21.4. And they're right there, very, very close in total yards per game allowed, 327 and 354. Last thing I'll point to with that Tennessee game, the closing line when Texas A&M went to Tennessee was Tennessee minus 3.5, total of 54. Right now we're looking at Texas A&M on the road Mississippi -3 and 54. Virtually the same exact line. So many similarities between those two games. I bring it up because that game ended 20-13. 3 touchdowns under the total. The total plays in that game were low for a Mississippi game, for a Tennessee game. Only 133 total plays in that game. A&M did enough to slow it down. Um, the Volunteers' run game, they ran it enough to slow it down a little bit. Ole Miss, they've played 4 games this season that went over the current total of 54. 3 of those were in the non-conference. The teams that they got over this total against: Mercer 73-7, Tulane 37-20, Georgia Tech 48-23, LSU 55-49. Those 4 opponents for Mississippi, none of those have the characteristics of Texas A&M. You take the other 4 games Ole Miss has played, not a single one has touched 50 points yet, 49 being the high. Those 4 opponents: Alabama, Auburn, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, a lot more toward what A&M does as far as pace and capability on both sides of the ball is concerned. Ole Miss 4-1 under the total in SEC play. Feel like Texas A&M, their tempo will balance off the fast tempo of Ole Miss here. 54 looks too high here, guys. I'm going to play it under 54. Like I say, the Tennessee game went 20-13. Unless we have a massive amount of takeaways that lead directly to, let's say, 17 or more points, I think this one stays under 54. That's the way we're going to play it. Ole Miss at home against A&M, under 54 points.
We are looking at Mountain West action. Boise State, Fresno State. Guys, I want to, full disclosure, not only is this the best bet, this is an actual client release for me. I made this game pick 'em. Boise State getting a full touchdown. When you look at the body of work, yes, Boise State has 4 losses. Fresno State has 1 loss. Fresno State went to Purdue and won. Fresno State went to Arizona State and won. So I understand the love for Fresno State. But you look at conference action, they are -9 yards per game in Mountain West action. Boise plus 85 yards per game. Boise getting healthier as we go. You hear often, well, if a team's playing 2 quarterbacks, they don't have a true starting quarterback. That's the case for Boise. Both quarterbacks have played all but 1 game, both Green and Madsen together, but it's really this rush attack which keeps getting better. Austin Genty, 921 yards, almost 6.0 yards per carry. But what makes this team even better? George Halani was the #1 rusher in 2021. George Halani, 1,100 yards, was the #1 rusher last year. They just got him back last week. He only has 126 yards this week, but that gives you a dynamic duo in the background against the Fresno State team that's allowing 136 yards per game rushing in conference play. Boise State has played a much tougher schedule. And when you look at Boise State, let's remember this. I pulled up their depth chart today. They have 3 offensive linemen that started the season as a freshman or a sophomore. Well, it takes some time for those players to get acclimated. Guess what? This far into the season, we're now into November, those players have pulled their weight. They proved they are FBS talent offensive linemen, and they're showing exactly that with Boise's O-line and their rush performance. I want you to, if you're watching this game, take a look at Austin Genty. He leads the country this year with 72 broken tackles. That's amazing. In 8 games, he breaks 9 tackles per game. I'm a big fan of this Boise State. I think they finished the season strong. I think Boise wins this game outright. They beat New Mexico next week. They're at Utah State, and then it's going to boil down to their final home game of the season as they host Air Force. It'll be a great Mountain West matchup. Again, Boise State +3, not only a best bet, but an actual client release. I appreciate you tuning in and watching this Mountain West Conference breakdown.
Best bet for today is going to be, actually, this is a Saturday game. I shouldn't say for today's show, but obviously a Saturday game. We're going to play the Navy Temple game over 44.5. Went into the pile of obscurity, found ourselves a game where we think we have an advantage here. Couple of reasons, and really This handicap is based on just a few reasons, but I think these few reasons are so strong that we have to play this game over 44.5. Let's just start with where with this game opened. Navy as a 7.5 point road favorite, total of 41.5. Since then, it's come down to Navy minus 6.5. The total has gone up to 44.5. That based on the news that EJ Warner, starting quarterback for Temple, is back this week. And what a difference EJ Warner makes in the Temple offense. We just saw it 2 games in a row without him. It's not the same. Warner had 2 games off. Temple had a bye week last week. He's had 3 full weeks to get healthy prior to this week's practice week. We look for him to go. As I mentioned, the offensive playbook with backup Quincy Patterson was a 360-degree turnaround from what Temple does with Warner on the field. With Patterson in that first game where he replaced Warner against North Texas, he was the team's leading ball carrier, ran the ball 24 times as Temple switched to basically a run heavy option type running offense with Patterson involved in the game heavily, as indicated by the 24 carries. Between Patterson, who got that game as the starter, got the SMU game as the starter, but was pulled for number 3 quarterback Forrest Brock, the Temple passing game in those 2 games combined, North Texas and SMU, 25 of 59. Only 212 yards, no touchdowns, 4 interceptions. They had to shift identity completely because they're just not a good throwing team without Warner. But with Warner back, we expect Temple to get back to doing what they do best. And what they do best certainly fits what the Navy defense can't do, and that's defend the pass. Let's go through some numbers here real quick. Warner and the Temple pass offense, I think they're going to thrive against this Navy defense in Navy games where they didn't play Wagner, where they didn't play Charlotte, where they didn't play Air Force. In games other than that, Navy's allowed 71% completions, 269 passing yards per game. Let's narrow it down even further. Temple has the 14th fastest tempo in the country. 2 teams that Navy played with tempo in that vicinity: South Florida, North Texas. South Florida is number 1 in tempo, North Texas number 9. Those 2 teams averaged 302.5 passing yards per game, and they completed 0.6% of their passes, excuse me, versus Navy. Those 2 games, guys, averaged 62.5 points per. I think Temple's going to get theirs here. They showed that they can throw it. Navy can't really defend it. I'm going to take a half a second here because otherwise I won't be able to get the rest of this analysis out. Navy's triple option game figures to have a field day with Temple's run defense. Temple's run defense ranks 128 out of 133 FBS teams. They give up 217.5 yards per game. You know, it's been a continuing theme of mine this year that I've played games over where I think that the perception is where the number is set rather than the reality. Perception here is that you have 2 bottom feeders that are low production teams and they won't score any points. However, the matchups indicate to me that points should be plentiful. The weather in Philadelphia on Saturday is going to be 62 degrees. Pretty sunny here. I think Warner comes back with a vengeance against the Navy defense. I think Navy's run offense, which Temple probably doesn't have the capability to even prepare for, gets their share as well. This probably lands somewhere in the 51 vicinity. The 2 games that Navy played, as I mentioned, against fast tempo teams did get up to 62.5 points. So I think this one, the number's just too low. I think we get up and over 44.5, a 24-21 game wins for us. And again, I think you probably get more in the vicinity of 28-24, that 51-52 range. So let's play it over, Navy at Temple.